Okay, well, we just finished our install from the previous video of 64-bit Ubuntu. So it's been sitting here for a few minutes and it finally has determined, yes, there's some missing software. Would you like to upgrade it? Things like that. Because I think technically the installer that we had was a little bit older of an installer. So maybe we will update that. But in the event you get something like this installed, um, I'm going to go ahead and for right now, just for performance reasons or speed reasons, the presumption would be if you always had the latest, greatest Ubuntu, you wouldn't need to do this. So I'm just going to select Ask Me Later for right now. We're going to focus on patching the current version of Ubuntu. So I'll say Ask Me Later. All right. So let's assume that we're sitting here at this base screen. I'm going to hit next a couple times in case there's something that it tells me that's interesting on this. Otherwise, we're just going to go into the software updater here in a second. All right. So I hit next and now it's asking me, would you like to keep your computer secure by setting up live patch? This requires restarting, things like that. You could choose to do this if you want. The idea is that you're probably going to be um, yeah, running this virtual machine only when you're doing homework and things like that. So anything that might hinder performance might not necessarily be something you want to do. If you're interested, you can click Set up Live Patch. I think you have to create an account with Ubuntu, and it'll go through that. We're not going to do that right now. We'll just hit Next. Do you want to help improve Ubuntu? You can hit yes or no. Again, I'm going to go ahead and hit no so we can limit the number of resources that this virtual machine is using. I don't think it's really going to take that many resources anyways. So if you feel strongly about helping improve the project, which isn't a horrible idea, you can go ahead and keep it saying yes, but I'm going to say no. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to install some software. So I'll go ahead and say open software now. All right, and it brings it up like this. Now, a common piece of software that we are going to install is VS Code. I believe that's in here. All right, so here we have is Visual Studio Code. Now, there's kind of two different things that you can do when you're installing software in Ubuntu. One is you can go through their own software installation tool, which we're using right here. And I think that's actually um, this icon over here on the left under Software Updater, but it might actually, no, it's Ubuntu software, this guy. We'll click the updater here in a few minutes, but we're just going to install something real quick. VS Code is a good example. So there might be a whole bunch of software. You can kind of think of this like the App Store for Ubuntu. There might be software that is already available on here. Now, if it's not available through here and you're downloading it off of a website like Firefox, this is the web browser that comes pre-installed, you might choose to well, what would be easiest to do is to install or download what's called the Debian package. If it doesn't actually say Ubuntu on it, as long as it says Debian, Debian, Ubuntu is built on top of Debian Linux. That should be an installable package, and it would actually open up inside of Ubuntu software to install. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Visual Studio Code here. We'll click on install. It's asking for my password. So that's the default is the 012345678 I'll hit authenticate. Do I have to hit install a second time or is it cooking? Oh, it was already installing. It just didn't. Okay. I think it's because I installed it. I hit the button a second time that it gave me this little error, but I'm pretty sure it worked here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit launch. We'll just make sure that it functions. So I'll launch Visual Studio Code. And there is Visual Studio Code running on our system. Now, one thing I like doing, I might be able to do it from out here now that it's running. If you right click on Visual Studio Code, you can say add to favorites. And what that'll do is it'll keep it on this left bar. So presuming you're a computer science student, you're going to be using this for software development, that might be a handy thing to have on that left bar. So I'll go ahead and say add to favorites. Similarly, if I click the show applications thing down here, and one of the things that I'm probably going to use pretty often is terminal. So go ahead and click on terminal. That'll open up a terminal. And I'm also going to put that on favorites. That's something I'd probably open up pretty often. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and do a software update to make sure we're up to date. So we've installed a third-party piece of software. We've added a couple of things to our favorites. I'll go ahead and click on software updater over here. And it's saying there's been some updates since I installed it. Do I want to install those now? I'll go ahead and say install now. Again, put in my password, 0123456789. Hit authenticate. And it shouldn't take too long. I think it was just a medium amount of security updates. Had you done that upgrade that it popped up, that's effectively a new version of the operating system that would have probably taken a reasonable amount of time to install. But since we don't have that ISO up, I think we actually have the latest stable version of Ubuntu, and that's what the install is. I can double check that, but typically with Ubuntu and some other Linux distributions, there's kind of a like a latest version that's fully supported and kind of considered to be pretty stable, and then there's a version that might be one or two version numbers newer that is kind of the latest greatest technology in there, but maybe not necessarily as stable as the older one because things haven't already been patched and stuff like that. So if you're using it as a daily workstation, you don't need some of the newer bells and whistles, whatever they might be. Maybe you run the latest, the older, more stable version. If you're just kind of a Linux enthusiast, or you want to play around with the operating system, maybe you want the latest greatest stuff just to see how it's evolving to try to compete with the more mainstream operating systems like Windows as well as Mac OS. So kind of pick your poison. I think we will probably put a newer ISO on there just so you have that as an option. You'd follow the same instructions as you did for this. You would just pick a different install ISO. I can click on details. It shows me what it's currently doing, a whole bunch of stuff in here. And I'm going to show you one additional thing in this video. vSphere VMware typically wants you to install some virtual machine tools that kind of make the operating system act better with make the virtual machine act better with the guest operating system. For Linux, typically they actually want you to install the Open VM tools. So rather than mount the tools that you can install directly from the vSphere, and we're going to use something called apt-get to do that. So it's another way of installing software that may or may not be available on the Ubuntu software. So Ubuntu software are kind of apps that have been put onto and approved for the Ubuntu App Store, where apt-get is an open source project that manages packages, in this case Debian packages, for installing on Linux. Okay, so finish the updates. It wants me to restart. What I'm going to actually do is, just since I'm doing this other thing now as well, I'm going to go ahead and say restart later. And I'm going to go out to the terminal. And we're going to say apt-get. Actually, apt-get typically needs to be run as a super user. So we're going to say sudo, that says super user do, apt-get update. So this will update the apt-get library. It's going to want my password 0123456789. So it's going to hit these different sources and make sure it has the latest, greatest listing of the pieces of software that are available. Okay. So now we're going to do, let's see, I need to say apt-get. I just need to do a .h real quick because I need to search for it. Here, I'm actually going to look on, I want to get the name of it. There is a way to search. I just don't want to have too much extra bloat. Apt-get open VM. I think it's like open VM services. Oh, it's open VM tools. All right, so we're going to do sudo apt-get install open-vm-tools. All right, so it's saying, hey, if you want to install tools, you're also going to need all these extra packages. This is kind of the nice thing of a package manager like apt-get. So it has all these dependency packages. So it's saying, are you okay with us installing all that stuff as well? So you can either type yes, or since it's capitalized, you can just press enter. That's the default is yes. And it's going to go and download all this stuff and process it and all that stuff. Okay, so now we presumably have the open VM tools installed, and we did just do a software update. So let's go ahead and let's just reboot our virtual machine, and we'll say that this video is done. So I'll go ahead and do a reboot as soon as it finishes booting back up. So I just typed in reboot. We'll say that we have a patched operating system, and we've installed Visual Studio Code, and we also installed the OpenVM tools from apt-get, which is, you know, a nice thing to have when you're running a virtual machine anyways. So it makes it work better with the virtual server or virtual machine server, in this case VMware. But you've also seen examples of how to install software from the Ubuntu software store, as well as from the command line using apt-get. All right, I'll see you in the next video.